took out my calendar and put an event on the last day and said, "You can do anything as long as you have an end date. You can be as busy as you need to be as long as you know it will end."
So, what would you say is the biggest piece of advice that changed your life that somebody told you?
Okay. I've got two here, and both of them are from Dennis Askew. Um, Sorry about the coughing. It's dry here. Um, the first one, I was writing my dissertation. I was teaching basically full time down in Rock Hill and in a pretty full semester of coursework at UNCG, just trying to finish up. And to top it all off, Megan was pregnant with Lizzie, and I was pretty stressed at the time. And Dennis took out my calendar and put an event on the last day and said, "You can do anything as long as you have an end date. You can be as busy as you need to be as long as you know it will end. Where you get in trouble is when that is indefinite." And that helps a lot. I mean, especially as we're rolling through the semester, college professors, we burn bright for a little while and then we take a break. Um, and so right now I'm in the burning bright phase, but spring break is like 2 months away, so I can burn bright for 2 months. And the other one, another Dennis Askew one, which this one was really uncharacteristic of him, because if you knew Dennis, he very light personality, very jovial, and was like serious as a heart attack. He knew my wife was pregnant because everybody knew at that point. It was my last lesson before I was done studying at UNCG. The dissertation stuff was all sorted out, and I was applying for jobs, and at the same time I was trying to build enough work in Rock Hill so I could eat food and live indoors. And he stopped me at the end, and basically what it came down to is you are not your job. That is not the most important thing. Is your employment. You're about to have a kid, and your priorities need to be focused on the things that are important. Your kid's only going to be little for a little while, um, and do your job, but do the things that are more important with your kid. Don't let that get in the way. Which, as somebody at the time who was freelancing, is easy to do. Freelancing, who anyone who's done it full time can tell you, it's way more than a full time job. It's kind of a lifestyle.
Yeah. Cool. If you could travel back in time to your younger self and tell him something that you think would help him out, what would you say?
um, well, I think that would change like as I got to different points in sort of my development. If it was undergrad me, it would be practice more. Which man, I remember as a student thinking, boy, I can't wait until I'm done with school. I'll have so much time to practice. No, that is not how that works. If you're a student listening to this, I'm sorry. Enjoy it while you can. It never gets easier to practice than when you're an undergraduate student. Um, and then I think going through grad studies, DMA, um, say yes to more. I was really hyper focused on getting into this track of being a college teacher that I ended up turning down some opportunities that I think may have even taken my career in a different direction. And where things started to kind of get, I guess you would say, on track for me is when I started saying yes to things that like I normally wouldn't. Like when I took that first big job touring with Tim Zimmerman and the King's Brass, I don't think that's something that I would have necessarily said yes to, because I was a serious orchestral musician trained to do serious work, and that was not the serious kind of work I wanted to do. That was dirty commercial playing, um, and but that opportunity led to more opportunities. In fact, it's exactly how I started college teaching. Um, and Eric Henson, the bass trombonist of the group, who's also in South Carolina still, sorry, was we were eating breakfast one day, and he's like, "Aren't you in Greensboro?" Well, yeah. Um, have you heard of Winthrop University before? No. Well, they're in Rock Hill, and they're looking for a tuba teacher. Their assistant band director just reached out to me. They had worked together, Doug Presley and Eric Henson at Limestone University. Um, and Eric didn't play tuba, so he was hesitant about applying. Told me to do it, and then I applied, and of course I got the position, and was there for 7 years. Um, and so just saying yes, and that led to so many other things as I was freelancing, just being like, oh, you want a tuba player for a German band and an art installation? Okay, how much does it pay? $100 and free beer? Sure, why not? But then you go there, and then while you're on the beer break, you go hobnobbing with all those people, and you never know who you meet. And then you eventually you get this digital Rolodex of all of these people who know who you are and know that, well, what you do, and you do it well. And then they go, oh, well, I need a tuba player. Well, who do I know that does this well? Oh, well, I know Doug, and I met him at this Oktoberfest celebration at the Columbia Art Museum. You know, and so say yes to more, and if you're an undergrad, practice a lot, um, a whole lot. I was not a very diligent undergraduate student. I was kind of lost.
Yeah, time definitely doesn't come after graduation.
Oh my
That's for
goodness,
sure.
no.
No.
Especially once you have a kid, you're not in that
Mhm.
boat yet. I don't think. I don't know if you're looking at going down that path, but boy, practice time becomes hard to come by. In my new house here in Murfreesboro, we have a shed right outside of the house. It's probably about 100
Mm.
yards. That's finished and has an air conditioner, so I can practice at
Nice.
night. It's a game changer. I feel like an undergrad again because I can go to my late night practice sessions without waking
To a
up my
little
wife or my
closet and
kid.
yeah. That's awesome. Cool. So, I'm a person that loves to read. I don't always make the time for reading, but I love to read. And I know a lot of others love to read. So, what would you say is potentially like one of your top favorite books? And it can be music related or anything related that you feel like has made an impact to you.
I have a bunch. I read a lot, especially now in my current job where I have to wear many hats,
Mhm.
and I find myself rereading some music education material, especially. Um, on that front, Bennett Reamer's A Philosophy of Music Education is excellent. You can see the bookmarks. I'm reading it right now for the history and philosophy class I'm teaching my grad students tomorrow, so I don't sound stupid when I'm in front of them. Um, but our philosophy, they focus on music education in the book, but I think it applies generally to performing. But honestly, if you're performing for a living, you're probably doing teaching. I don't know
Mm.
anyone who's performing that's doing no teaching. um, but just having that sort of guiding light in our decisions. Some other ones, and these are more, I guess, well, there's one more music ed one, The Ways Children Learn Music, which is written by Eric Bluestein, and it delves into sort of the it's basically watered down Edwin Gordon. He was one of Edwin Gordon's students, and just a great read if you're trying to dig deeper into music ed. Although Gordon can be somewhat of a controversial figure sometimes. And then the PD books. You probably remember this one. I think I gave you a copy when you graduated, Joseph. The Savvy Musician, the David Cutler
Mhm.
book.
Yeah.
This when I was freelancing, this is my go-to resource, because and I think you can probably attest to this. You've been through a few degrees in tuba performance, and they talk about freelancers much like my daughter talks about unicorns. They're these magical things that are really cool that maybe they exist, but we have no clue how they work. And
Mm.
this was it was really useful to help kind of when I was in that first phase of stumbling through freelancing, um, and just kind of making a lot of mistakes and trying my best to make enough money so I could feed my kid. Um, and it definitely helped point me in the right direction. And another one, sort of professional development book. I know this is the last one, I promise. Um, you
I
want
love
one book, I give you a library. I guess
it.
that's what you get for interviewing a professor. Is The Professor is in The Essential Guide to Turning Your PhD into a Job. Um, and this is written by Karen Kelsey. She runs a service The Professor is in, not sponsored. Um, Although, I mean, I'll take it. And so, a lot of this is just systematizing the materials you turn in so that, sorry, so that, that they look right when you turn them in. And I feel like there was a little effort at UNCG to teach that. We had one course, I think it was called Tenure Track Teaching. But basically, any materials we turned in, he was like, "Great, A plus." He ended up moving on to administration. That professor, um, he was a wonderful music education professor that got tossed into a class that I don't think he wanted to teach. Um,
Mhm.
but in sort of uh, this sort of gamification of or standardization of the job materials you turn in, so like your CV, your cover letter, things to do on the campus interview, things to do on the Zoom interview, how to navigate sort of conferences, although academic conferences are very different than Tuba conferences. I learned from reading her book because I'm like, I don't think this would work at ITEA. We won't say why, but we've all been to ITEA conferences. But I think that was kind of instrumental in me finally landing the job because I went from applying to basically every job I was remotely qualified for, and maybe one a year would check my recordings because most of the jobs I applied to are obviously tuba euphonium jobs that involved a lot of applied teaching. To almost every job checks my references after I kind of fit my academic paperwork to fit her sort of schema there, and so I highly recommend it. Um, if you're looking to get an academic job, it's one of the two books that I give my grad students now. Now they get Savvy Musician and The Professor is in. And both of those books are really inexpensive. So if you're looking at
Mhm.
freelancing and want to kind of figure it out before you have to figure it out, it's a good way to kind of give yourself a head start.
Sweet. Awesome. So, what would you say was the biggest challenge that you've personally had to overcome with getting where you are today?
I think for me, it was just an endurance challenge. Um,
Mhm.
because the entire time I was freelancing, I was applying for these tenure track jobs, and sorry, I need to get my humidifier in here. But I was applying to these tenure track jobs for the entirety of the 7 years I was teaching at Winthrop University, and I was getting interviews every year, um, pretty consistently. I'd made it to the be runner up of a few jobs, and so um, and as you're doing that sort of endurance challenge, which I think is part of it now, because there are so many incredibly qualified candidates. Um, I was reading about the Richmond Symphony audition. Somebody was talking about it on social media, and I think they said there were 70 tuba players that passed the resume round for one position.
Mm,
Um, that doesn't even, I mean, it's a full time position, but a lot of those orchestral positions, if you're not in Chicago, New York, or LA, pay particularly well, but everyone and their mom's going to show up to it.
yeah.
Um, and so, kind of building that resume over time while you're doing the freelance thing, because I mean, it's kind of hard once you're in the job to do the things to build the job because those all take time. Like going out and performing, going to these conferences, giving lectures, writing for the journals. All those things take time, and a lot of them you don't get paid for. And when
Mhm.
you're freelancing, money can get kind of tight. Because my wife's a teacher, which thankfully gave me benefits, which is the hardest part for a lot of freelancers, and where freelancing falls apart for so many is like, how do I get health insurance? And thankfully, Megan was willing to put up with me while I was doing all the freelancing, um, and was the provider of insurance for the whole family. Um, and so, yeah, it's one of those things where you, if you want to do it, you have to stick in there. But
Mhm.
that can also be so difficult, not even from that perspective, but from mental health. I see so many people who I even thought were like better than me that I was like, there's no way this person won't get a job before me. That are almost completely out of the game now
Yeah.
because they couldn't. It's difficult when you go to school. I distinctly remember at my defense that they told me I would have a tenure track job the next year, and I was like, okay, thanks. That's very nice. I do appreciate your confidence in me, but I don't know if you know how bad the job market is. You know how many people graduated with a DMA this year for all two tuba positions.
Yeah.
I mean, because this year I think so far there's been four, no five. I forgot about Auburn. So and that's just teaching tuba euphonium at the college level. I don't track the orchestral auditions as well anymore, or the rock
Mhm.
band ones, but I'm sure they're. I know Richmond's happening right now.
Yeah.
Um, but um, but yeah, not many jobs, so many DMAs.
You can do the math.
Yeah, I mean your chances are low. It's a series of like winning the lottery over and over again to be a full time musician. Is
Mhm.
like if you want to look at, I was fortunate. Like I won the lottery. I got uh, a full scholarship for undergrad, and then I won the lottery again. I got an assistantship for graduate school that covered all of my tuition and came at a stipend. And then I won the lottery again. I got an assistantship that covered my full tuition and a stipend at UNCG. And then I feel like I won the lottery getting the gig teaching tuba and euphonium at Winthrop, which of
Mhm.
course led to like all of the other opportunities. That was kind of like my home base gig that led to me being able to freelance. You know, and then of course I feel like I won the lottery again when getting the job at Alabama A&M where I am now. And if I were to try to move on to a bigger institution, you know, I'd have to win the lottery again.
Yeah.
Um, and so the chances are slim, and uh, you know you have to make your own way and get used to rejection.
Mhm.
A lot of rejection.
Yeah. That's a big one. Um, cool. So my next question I always like to ask to help to provide clarity, especially for younger musicians, maybe that are in high school or just starting out music ed degree and have these big aspirations, and those aspirations are great and awesome. But I always like to ask, what does a typical day look like for you as somebody that's doing the thing?
Okay. So my days all look pretty different. Just because of my position, I have to wear a lot of hats. So at Alabama A&M, I teach low brass, and so trombone, euphonium, tuba. I'm also the coordinator of instrumental music education, and so for that, I'm teaching low brass methods, music in elementary schools, instrumental music in secondary schools, um, and then most of the grad coursework. So I teach K-12 music curriculum. I
Mhm.
teach history and philosophy of music education. I teach graduate conducting. I also teach undergraduate conducting, the basic course. Thankfully, our better conductors teach the advanced courses. I'm not the best conductor, but you know I can get them through that first course. And the grads are
Oh,
so
we
easy.
survived to a band, so
Yeah, you survived tuba band exactly. And I don't take pride in it, but I will fully admit in my graduate conducting course I am the worst conductor in the room. Um, and those kids they know it, but I mean as long as you know the philosophy, you know the mechanics, you know the theory behind it, you can still be pretty helpful. Um, because where they excel in their conducting, they tend to lack in being able to like prepare a rehearsal methodically,
Mhm.
and to be able to do it in advance. Like you know from tuba band that I was pretty good at anticipating what parts were not going to work well, and then
Yeah.
develop a plan quickly to be able to rehearse that so you guys could play it well. Um, I mean that was huge at Winthrop. That's what led that ensemble, all the way to iTech.
Mm-hmm.
So I wear all these different hats, and so my days are way different day to day. And once those grad students and a few of my undergrads get into student teaching, I'm also their student teaching supervisor. And so
Okay.
for all of the instrumental grads, I do that. And so right now, this semester, I feel great because I don't have music appreciation. Usually, I have to teach at least one section a semester, but this semester, it just worked out that I had too many grad classes. Darn. Um, and so, generally speaking, I don't have to be at the university until 10 o'clock. On
Mm-hmm.
Monday and Friday, I don't have any classes. But most of that is spent on one of the other hats I wear at A&M, which is coordinator of assessment for the music department. And so right now we're working on our chip assessments, and next and next month we start on the graduate chip assessment, which is the continuous improvement education plan,
Mm-hmm.
which is something the state of Alabama makes us do, unless we get NASM accredited, which is the other thing I'm working on Monday and Friday. And then on Friday, usually Fridays are also sort of my days that I go out. I'll recruit when I can.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'll be out at Huntsville High School here pretty soon, trying to get a few students, hopefully, to come on over. And also, that's when I'll go out and like play recitals when I can. I've got a few guest artist recitals lined up. Um, Tuesday, I teach applied lessons in the morning. So I think I start at around 10 to around 4. And then from 4 to 7, I teach a graduate course. Wednesdays are just my applied lesson days. So I have an assessment meeting in the morning with our schools coordinator of assessment. So I'm the music department, he's the school of ed. And
Mm-hmm.
so he's sort of my boss in that one. Um, and we'll have that meeting, and then we'll move on to teaching lessons from around noon to 6 p.m. And then on Thursdays, I'm teaching courses all day. That's the day I teach elementary music, and then I go straight from elementary music to low brass methods, straight from low
Mm-hmm.
brass methods to music in instrumental music in secondary schools, straight to graduate conducting. And so, like, I don't even have a lunch break. I just teach straight through the day, and then
Oh wow.
Friday back to yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little rough. I give my grad students a little break in the middle of that class, and that's usually like
Mm-hmm.
when I'm scarfing a sandwich down as fast as I can, because I feel bad at that point because I've just been working all day,
Mm-hmm.
and so and in there too, you have to find time to practice. And so oftentimes I do that at night. And then, you also have to take care of yourself because it turns out,
Yeah.
you're a person. And so I try to exercise in the mornings. Wednesdays usually I don't get to just because I'm so busy. And then I've also
Mm-hmm.
got other obligations like with the brass band of Huntsville. I'm on their board, and I play with them from time to time. And so Thursdays after I'm done with that huge block of teaching, I have 1 hour off, and then brass band until 9:30 p.m. And then I drive an hour and a half to get back home.
Yeah.
And then Friday morning I sleep in before I get to assessment work.
Yeah.
And so
That
quite
sounds.
a bit different from the freelancing work,
Mm-hmm.
um, but still a pretty full schedule.
Yeah. Definitely.
I got one of those easy college gigs where you don't have to work at all.
Yeah.
That didn't include any of the committee work because that doesn't meet
Mm-hmm.
consistently. But I'm on, not counting assessment, I'm on 4 committees right now, which is for a smaller university that's like fairly light load.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of my other colleagues are on like 7 committees. I'm
Jeez.
like, why?
Yeah.
You don't get tenure points for that.
That's a lot. That's
Yeah,
definitely a big change from what I experienced with you doing at Winthrop. So
yeah. Well, I
yeah.
mean, I would still put in those 12-hour days at Winthrop. It was
Yeah.
just all teaching.
Just yeah.
And so I feel like this is more manageable in the long term. I don't know that I would have the steam in me to keep teaching those 12-hour days, when I'm 60 years
Mm.
old.
Yeah.
It's also nice having a date on in my calendar that I could tell the state that I'm done, and they will
Mhm.
continue to pay me in perpetuity.
That is nice.
Yeah, isn't it? You've got that
Mhm.
now with your gig
Yeah.
too. There's a
Yeah.
date on
No,
the
that.
calendar past which you can say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Mhm.
But
That is
you have to
nice.
keep paying me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So to kind of wrap up here, what do you believe is the most important skill a tuba player should have, and how do you recommend they improve upon it?
Tuba playing specifically? Um, well, I think idiomatic tone. I don't think
Mhm.
anything else matters. And I've listened to a number of these interviews, and everyone's like rhythm, rhythm, rhythm. But your rhythm doesn't really matter if you don't sound good because no one's going to
Mhm.
hire you anyway. Um, and that was something I picked up from Jim Copenhaver at USC, who he would say in kind of his surly little accent that if idiomatic tone is not achieved, nothing else matters. And how do we get there? Well, one, practicing is a good way to start. But two, listening to a ton of tuba players, um, preferably ones that are professional tuba players. Well, no, I mean now with social media and YouTube, it's so easy to find recordings of really great tuba players.
Mhm.
But it's also really easy to find really bad tuba playing on there from
Yeah.
amateurs that they do it for fun, or students that maybe they don't have another outlet for it, or they're posting it for like a competition, but instead of putting it unlisted they put it as public because they don't know how YouTube works. um, and so a lot of listening, a lot of practicing long tones, obviously long tones and long tones and long tones. um, Finding people that you can trust that will listen to you and tell you how you sound. That's one of the many lovely things my wife does. I can tell her to come out and she will tell me if she thinks it does not sound good, and exactly why it doesn't sound good. And she's got a great musical ear. She's also a musician. And I think that's great. If you're looking at it from sort of the freelancing mindset, I think the most important skill you can have, um, there's two: perseverance and being able to write well. You have to be able to write emails that make you look like a literate person. You can't email a band director and be like, "I teach tuba," because they will not call you to be around their children. Um, and you would be surprised how many people go. Well, I don't think you'd be surprised. You've been through a master's degree. You know exactly how many people think that like the only skill I need is to be insanely good at my instrument, and then
Mhm.
like step one, insanely good at instrument. Step two, step three, full time job, like set for life. But that step two is where it's at, and being able to present yourself like a professional, especially if you're freelancing. It's little things: being consistently on time, answering emails reasonably quickly. Like obviously, you don't need to live on your phone. Set boundaries, but if an email sits in your inbox for 3 weeks, that person no longer wants to hire you. They've moved on.
Yeah.
That person who sends you an inquiry about lessons, if you wait 3 weeks to get back to them, even if there's no one else teaching tuba in that town, they just don't want to take lessons with you anymore.
Mhm.
And so, and then for the professorate, a whole lot of patience, um, and um, diplomacy. I think is the biggest skill that I find myself employing way more than as a freelancer.
Mhm.
Because you have a lot of very intelligent and very skilled people you work with that are very set in their ways.
Yeah.
And if you are trying to convince them of something that they have decided is not their idea, it can be difficult.
Mhm.
Because some can be pretty immovable until you convince them that it was in fact their idea, and that idea is now brilliant because they thought of
Mhm.
it. Much like working with a principal at any school.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced that, where you said
Well,
something and then 2 weeks later they've spontaneously had this idea that is the same idea you had 2 weeks ago, but is now
that they
much smarter
magically thought
because they
of.
thought of it.
Yeah.
Yes. And so sometimes you have to plant those little seeds.
Hmm.
And if you can't, you have to build enough faculty members that'll vote against that person in the faculty meeting.
Yeah. Play the politics.
Surprising amount
Hmm.
for a profession that should be student centered.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
that's an
That's
entirely
a
different
yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, it is.
That would require entirely different beverages than the water that I have on my desk.
Is there anything you got coming up that you're working on you want to share, or
Oh
we
yeah, I've
can just
got tons coming up that I'm working on because
cool?
I work all the time. I never sleep. Um, so I've got a guest artist recital coming up at Southeastern University in March. I had one at USC, University of South Carolina, but Ron Davis is on workers' compensation right now, so we had to postpone it.
Oh,
Um, he tripped on his way in, fell onto the pavement, and broke his nose.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'll send you the picture. If and Ron, of course, in the most Ron Davis fashion one could say, said, "Well, you should see the other guy." Bless Ron Davis's heart. And then, of course, we got the North American Brass Band Championships hosted here in Huntsville. The Brass Band of Huntsville is the host group, so we're running all that stuff to help logistically make it possible. Obviously, we're getting help from the NABA board, so Tony
Hmm.
Granados and those guys kind of scattered all around the country. But most of the on the ground work in Huntsville is happening with us on the board, and that's April 21st and 22nd at the Von Braun Center in Huntsville. And so I think they said there was 37 bands that are coming this time,
Oh
and
wow.
so it should be a pretty fun show.